Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Men and Sex. I'm your host, Mr. Wood. This podcast is all about normalizing the taboo conversations. We talk about sexuality here. We talk about masturbation. We talk about porn. We talk about semen intention. All the things that there's very few places to talk about. Today, we're going to dive into one of my favorite subject matters with one of my favorite people, Dr. Kevin Jenson. He was on episode number 9, where we talked about sex, God, and the Bible. Biblical scholar, man of many hats, and really excited for coming back into the subject. I have so many passions about what we're going to talk about today, but I'll let us go into it softly instead of rushing into it. Kevin, welcome
Mm,
back, brother.
love it. It's so good to be here, Ian, and thank you for what you're doing. It's really a privilege to be part of the conversation and especially to be part of it with a community of men who are all coming together around this topic to share our questions and experiences.
I feel that classic, no, thank you for what you're doing. And that's why
Yes.
I love bringing you on here is your wisdom and how you bring it into these discussions where it intersects with sexuality. And I think it's one of the most important things, and this subject and how we're going to dive into it today is a peeling back of why I believe it's so important. Hmm. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. I don't want to give too much away.
Okay.
Tell the audience a little bit more about what your studies are and what it means to be a biblical scholar and how you intersect that with even thinking about how the Bible pairs with sexuality.
Oh my goodness. Those are some really big questions. I think we could spend a whole podcast on each one. I will try to give a quick overview, and that is I'll start off with my book. I wrote
Yeah.
this book, Sacred Not Sinful: A New Christian Sexual Ethic, about 3 years ago. And after I published it, I realized that I had approached the biblical text through the English language.
Ooh.
And it is okay, perfectly okay to do that. It is perfectly okay to read the words in the book and to feel the meaning come through, to have maybe a traditional sense, to be able to pray things and feel connected to God. But it also becomes a little complicated when your experience of the text shows up next to my experience of the text. And both of us have something of a different conclusion about how we relate to God. And so I had this question, on what basis can we all approach this common book that we all look to understand the Judeo-Christian tradition? On what basis can we approach this book in a way that allows diverse perspectives to lead us to a better understanding, to a better ability to relate to ourselves, to God, and to the life that we have? So I've been kind of on this quest ever since that point where I put forth, here's my perspective, what I found through my studies, to say, okay, how have people studied this book throughout the Christian tradition? What does classical Christian theology have to say? I'm in a course in seminary next term with an incredible professor on sex, gender, and sexuality in Christian history.
Whoa.
So, as opposed to simply coming forth and saying, hey, I grew up with a really messed up view of sex, and the Bible was part of that, and I'm looking for my answer now,
Ooh.
I've kind of stepped back as a scholar and said, okay, how have people gone about finding answers to this question? What can we learn from that? And how can we move forward from there, maybe in a more positive and helpful direction?
Mm. Mm. Beautiful. And for the listeners, uh, w- both Kevin and I have talked about things we want to dive into this podcast, but we haven't told one another. And so we're all in for a juicy ride here. And I know that Kevin and I can talk for hours on any of these things. So
Yes.
it's gonna be powerful. So I'm gonna throw something out there. I want you
Okay.
to chew on it, and I'm gonna give a little bit of story while you're chewing on it. So what came to me in this conversation was who tells us how we should and shouldn't have sex? Who tells us how we should and shouldn't have sex. And I want to tell a story of my own experience in one person that told me how I should or shouldn't have sex. And it is a very strong memory of when I was younger, I would bounce around. My dad would take me to different churches. And in this church that I was at in particular was a Mormon church. And I remember having my meeting with the deacon, or I don't know what his role was or whatever, someone higher up, older guy wearing the things.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget him telling me these different rules of things I could and couldn't do. And one of them was, I remembered as if like could see his finger pointing at it in a book or something. And it was that I shouldn't or couldn't masturbate.
Hmm.
And that was basically it. Like you shouldn't or couldn't. I can't remember the right words, but that was how I interpreted it. And I was at an age where I was already a little bit rebellious and I was just like, oh, like I kind of laughed at it. I was kind of like, whatever.
Mhm.
I was already rebellious. Oh, you're not going to tell me what to do. But I was, in context to this conversation and in some of my experiences, I shared some with you earlier is like, how is this such a strong imprint in the collective consciousness around all these rules of how we should and shouldn't have sex? Same sex is bad. Before marriage is bad. This is bad. This is bad. There's like this sliver
Yes.
of a crack of acceptable sex that the tiniest percent of people are probably living by. And then the vast
Hmm.
majority of us are just in this collective consciousness of having all the wrong sex. And I know this impacts my
Mhm.
life, and I haven't been a ton in religion, so I know it's in the collective besides those of us that are raised in religions. And
Yeah.
so, where does this come from? These teachings of how we should and shouldn't have sex. Obviously, in the Bibles that you study, there's some there, but I know it's just not there as well.
Hmm. And maybe we can even expand that question into the question of why does religion have something to say about sex?
Hmm.
Because we do learn a lot in our culture about sex from porn, and whether or not it is providing claims about how sex should or ought to be, whatever it is that we see tends to be what we absorb as what should or ought to be done.
Yeah.
The second piece that comes in with this is that even within the porn context, there is still language that people use. For example, dirty talk. What does
Ooh.
that mean? And why is that potentially a good thing? Or why is it potentially a bad thing? And why do we label something that is sexual as dirty? Because now we have a moral judgment, doing dirty things, naughty things, taboo things, and sex somehow got that. And it still lives within the porn context. There is still this value system that is present in the language that's used. We also get this from our parents. And I think a lot of times about parents who have been one way in their life tend to want their kids to do a little bit of the opposite, maybe of what they did. And this happened in my church context. When somebody would come in to talk to us teenagers about sex, they would be like, back when I was your age, I was having sex all the time. But don't do what I did. You should not have sex. And I'm like, all right, what is it about their experience that made them want to teach the opposite experience? And maybe even on a more personal level, what is it about my own experience of repression and of fear that would give me the tendency to want to go to the other side and say, hey, you all do whatever you want. It's all okay and it's all fine. So I think it's important to kind of recognize that that reaction is present generationally and I think culturally in some ways.
Yeah.
So porn, parents, I would say also preachers. And here's where we get to that religion and sexuality question is why does religion have something to say about what you're doing in terms of sex? And for me, coming from a Christian tradition and having studied the Bible deeply, it saddens me to say this, that almost everything the Bible has to say about sex is how to do it wrong. So if somebody is coming from the Christian tradition, what they know about sex is here's where you can mess up. That said, we do have this book that has somehow survived thousands of years of pruning of texts and has made it into the present day. And the book is known as the Song of Solomon or the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. And Solomon has the reputation for having potentially satisfied thousands of women in his life. So he knows a little bit, perhaps, about sexuality. Now, because I'm a scholar, I have to note not everybody agrees that Solomon wrote it. Most people agree that there is an association with Solomon, and potentially for this reason, and potentially for the wisdom it contains.
Hmm.
Because this is the thing. We've approached this question so far as if it's, in a sense, problematic.
Yeah.
But what if a problem is actually just a little bit of a twisting of something good?
Ooh.
And what if there is something at the heart, at the core of religious traditions? I'll speak for Christianity, and I think we can also say something similar for a number of other traditions that are speaking to what is deepest and most true inside the human being.
Mm.
And how can we speak to that without also addressing sexuality?
Right.
So I think it is necessary that a religious practice should address sexuality. I think it becomes problematic when the only thing we know how to say about sex is how to do it wrong.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think and I shared some of my personal stories with you earlier is this that feeling of predominantly going through the perspective of how is this wrong?
Hmm.
That's and there's a term that I love, which is the subconscious mind cannot hear negation. And
Right.
that like really is present for me because no, 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 don't do it this way, don't do it this way, don't do it this way. It's like,
Hmm.
it's like don't think about the pink elephant. The mind goes to
Yes.
the pink elephant. So don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Now I'm thinking about all those things.
Yes, exactly.
And
Yep.
in arousal, particularly, which is so interesting and fascinating for me, is part of being aroused by something is often tied to that I shouldn't do it.
Hmm.
That's like a percolating energy that matches with arousal and turn on very well.
Interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting psychological perspectives to bring in on that. It's not necessarily my strong suit. I love what some people say about this. I think there's a guy named David Bederick who talks a lot about shame and how shame pervades our experience of different things. And then another mentor of mine who you've had on your podcast, Tyson Adams, he has a lot of really interesting things to say about how we associate that arousal with the taboo because sex, which is this thing we desire, is always taboo. And so now we're training ourselves. This thing that I want is the thing that I'm not supposed to want. So if I'm not supposed to want it, that must be really where I want to go. And so you can see how the brain constructs happen. And this is in religion, especially, we're lying to ourselves
Mm,
when we say you're not allowed to desire that, you're not allowed to want that. And so I sit here, I was raised in evangelical fundamentalist Baptist Christianity. And even to have a desire for sex without being married was sinful, and you didn't want to be sinful. And so my entire teenage years, my college life, my 20s was spent fighting against this natural urge and desire that I had toward intimacy, toward pleasure, toward beauty, toward all of these things that God created,
mm,
that God made good and beautiful, that are a part of my life. But because I had said, oh, this is sin, I never learned how to pursue and approach those desires in a way that added value to my life and to the lives of other people. All of these things, intimacy, beauty, pleasure, the body, these all got wrapped up in that label. And so we're fighting against ourselves, this internal battle, and lying to ourselves, saying, no, I don't want that because I'm a good Christian. I don't want that. But the reality is that you do. It's just that when we don't understand sex, when we don't understand that it's something more than smashing a couple of body parts together in a way that feels good, that it's more than somebody dominating somebody else and owning them and saying, "This is my property, I claim you, nobody else can have you." If those are the two things we think of when it comes to sex or maybe producing children,
Yeah.
then it's understandable why somebody would say, well, the moral guideline is don't desire this until after you've been married, because this is a total can of worms. But marriage as a practice of property ownership throughout the Bible is just appalling.
Yeah, I've heard some of your talks on said things.
Yes.
And I think, one of the reasons why I love having these conversations too, and I've heard you speak about this, is we are talking about a book that has been translated and was written in a different language than a lot of it was spoken in.
Yes.
And so there is multiple layers of translation that's leading to what we're reading. And it seems quite wild to me that we're not more curious about alternate translations and what they might be. In
Mhm.
particular, to these things that uh, fuel a lot of shame for people. It's like, what if that
Yeah.
was just a little bit different than we're hearing it now? And
Right.
it could prevent millions of people from thinking that they are this terrible animalistic thing and the serpent's gonna take them over and, whatever
Yep.
else.
Yeah. Well, you're asking a valuable question, and it's a difficult one to address because as a queer scholar in academia, I face I face an academic challenge that if I present something different, it's a different reading of the text, people are like, well, are you even a Christian? And if they're worried that I'm a Christian because I
Whoa.
read the Bible differently, then are they going to actually publish what it is that I have to say?
Whoa.
And now, what if I'm translating the Bible this way? And you know how Jesus says, do not look upon a woman with lust. Well, everybody knows that one. That's the reason why you don't look at porn, because Jesus said, don't have sexual desire over a woman, right? And, there's a lot of ways of interpreting that passage, but the actual meaning of the term lust is covetousness or desire to possess.
What?
It doesn't have anything to do with sexual desire except possibly one place in the whole Bible. So
Whoa.
now, if I retranslate this and I'm like, do not look upon a woman with a desire to own or possess her, now I am challenging the core sexual ethic of Orthodox Christianity, which is you need to own, marry, possess this person in order for sex to be a moral thing. Who's going to publish that Bible?
Whoa. I didn't even think about what it meant on that side of the translation.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, for one, it's wild, and I've heard you speak to many, to really go into these translations, but that little piece of the lust in a different translation, meaning to not own someone or possess someone. And when I hear that, I'm like, that makes so much more sense of what that teacher would like, of all the things that that teacher taught about, that feels so much more in alignment with the
Yes.
other teachings.
Yes. But then what do we do about sexual ethics if we don't have our core reference points? And, Christians have been saying this for hundreds of years now. Can I talk about another problem of translation where the Bible coming in to inform our modern sexual
Please.
ethics becomes problematic?
Yeah.
After the times of Jesus, which is when the New Testament books were being written, so say about maybe the years 100 Common Era AD, by this time the gospels have mostly been written, or at least they exist in story format in oral tradition. The letters of Paul have all been written by this point in time, and the Christian church is attempting to establish its credibility among a Greco-Roman culture. Now the Greco-Roman culture, they're suspicious of anything that's new. They want established philosophies. They want something that's 300 years old. And so Christianity is trying to carve out this space where they're Jewish, but not Jewish. So they want to have this attachment to the Hebrew scriptures and the temple tradition. But something changes around 70 AD, which is the time of the Jewish rebellion. This is the time when the temple gets destroyed by Rome and association with the Hebrews is no longer cool.
Hmm.
So this is all happening within the first century
Wow.
after the time of Christ. Then we get to the third century. So this is a year like say 250 to 350. This is the time of things like the Council of Chalcedon, the Council of Nicaea. These are where we talk about the divinity of Christ. This is where we establish our core Christian doctrines. By this time, the church had become so disconnected and detached from Judaism that they would begin to call them things like Christ killers.
Hmm.
You see just little tiny hints of this in a couple of the Gospels. I think it's particularly in John, where the author of the Gospel of John is trying to paint the Jewish leaders as the ones who killed Christ. It wasn't Rome, it was the Jewish leaders. They deserved what they got. We belong in empire, don't persecute us, kind of thing.
Mm.
So recognizing just some of the cultural political dynamics that are shaping early Christianity helps to explain this one point that when we get to people like Augustine, when we get to the early church fathers that people reference, they have almost totally detached from the Hebrew scriptures.
Hmm.
When we're forming Christian theology, we're forming it in terms of Greco-Roman philosophical theory, Greek philosophy, particularly, some Zoroastrian influence, which is where you get this idea of good versus evil, light versus darkness, the cosmic clash, the
Mm.
angel and devil on your shoulder. Which one are you going to follow?
Mm.
Zoroastrians are also where we get the concept of hell from as well.
Ooh.
So all of these things are making their way into the Christian tradition. Meanwhile, the Christian tradition is distancing itself from the Hebrew scriptures.
Yeah.
To me, this is problematic because the writers of the Gospels, the Apostle Paul, who was a Hebrew scholar, and Jesus, who was Jewish himself and who was teaching the law and the prophets, he was teaching a reformation within the context of the Hebrew scriptures. And what we inherited now in the Christian tradition was trying to distance itself from the roots of where we got all of our concepts.
Hmm.
So now when we're defining sin and sexual morality, we're doing it detached from the Hebrew roots. I'm pushing the edge of my studies here a little bit, but what I what some other researchers, and I'll just pull one of them out right here, is just absolutely beautiful. This book here is the Making of Fornication by
Ooh.
Kathy Gaka.
Whoa.
And this researcher, she's absolutely incredible. And what she goes into is linking the Christian conception of sexual sin to, I can't remember which of the philosophical schools that it was. I think it was largely the Stoics that influenced Christian sexual ethics. There was this belief that if somebody did not have sex, that they valued their philosophy more than their body. And we live in the age of Plato, who thinks that truth exists out here and that whatever is in the material world is a deception. So if you're trying to prove that what you have is philosophically the truth, then your body, sexuality, the physical world becomes the enemy. And if you are enjoying any of that, you are calling into question the legitimacy of your philosophy. And during those early formative years of Christianity, the legitimacy of Christianity was a huge question.
Mm. Yeah, of course.
So just complicating a little bit of when we're looking back at the Christian tradition and even at the Hebrew scriptures and saying how does it apply to today, we have to understand a little bit of the evolutionary process that it went through to reach us instead of just looking back and saying, oh yeah, well, St. Clement said this. Therefore, it must be true. He was an early guy. He got it right. Like, no, he didn't have blue letter Bible. He didn't probably have the whole of the Hebrew scriptures. Like books and texts were rare at that point in time. We, in our time and place, are so privileged to have the Bible in our language, to have ancient manuscripts, to have all kinds of academic foundation for these studies. And so it is not a surprise to me when people who take the time to really dig in end up with a slightly different conclusion than what it is that we inherited.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, from a lot of what I've heard you talk about, that sh seems to show up in sex, in marriage, in a lot of words that connect to sexuality.
Yes.
There's a lot of gray, or I've heard you talk about, in the English version, they may use the same word, but there's actually several words where it's coming from that is
Yes.
speaking to.
Yes. I have an exact note about this because I was studying the term for sin this year in my Hebrew course. So I'm studying biblical languages because they can capture concepts that don't exist in English ways of thinking. And one of the researchers I was looking at found 26 different Hebrew expressions for sin. So there's different kinds and nuances to, well, here's all of, we talked about all the ways that you can do it wrong. But here's the interesting thing is that never once, at least in the study of sin as a noun, is anything sexual called a sin.
Really?
Is that a surprise?
Yeah.
It's wild. I have a list of things that are called sin, but sin is a particular kind of thing in the Hebrew philosophical framework and in the Hebrew scriptures. It is a very specific thing. It stands up next to things like wickedness and unrighteousness and iniquity and abominations, like all of these things. And so there are, if we don't look at those words, and if we don't seek to understand how people conceptualize the world around them, we go in and we look and we're like, oh, this word sin is in the Bible. We shouldn't do sins, right?
Yes, we shouldn't do sins. That's so good.
Sins are all the bad things. But really, sins are a beautiful thing because the reason why this concept of sin exists in the Hebrew is thinking back not just within the Jewish tradition, but the surrounding cultural context. The term meant to miss the mark, to not live up to everything that we're called to be. And the way that this played out in the Hebrew scriptures was that, say, if a high priest did not live up to everything he was called to be, he had to bring a bull as a sacrifice, a big animal. If a political leader did not live up to all that he was supposed to be, he had to bring a goat. And then if somebody who was just a common layperson didn't live up to all they were supposed to be, they had to bring some super small sacrifice. But the point of this sacrifice was this, is that in that culture, say if it didn't rain, say if locusts came or your child was dying or some other tragedy came about, and these are all examples, in fact, from the Old Testament, from the Hebrew scriptures that are indications that sin has happened. When these kinds of things are taking place, the belief was, well, we have done something to offend the gods. Therefore, we
Ooh,
need to bring something called a sin offering so that the gods can come back and bless us again.
whoa.
So the whole concept of sin and the sin offering is this relationship with the divine, this mediating process. So when you're like, hey, I think maybe I inadvertently did something wrong and that's why my crops aren't growing, now you have something you can do about it to restore the relationship as opposed to just experiencing the wrath of the divine for whatever mess you made.
Wow. That's so wild. Oh,
Isn't it?
and I'm still trying to catch up my brain up to you saying that sin is not connected to sex.
All right. Maybe I can help. Would you like some of the examples of what is actually a sin?
Yeah.
Okay, so before I do this, I want to help us understand a distinction between two things. In English, we have things called nouns and things called verbs. Sometimes a noun and a verb can sound the same. And I was thinking about this earlier, like the word clean. If I were to say to you, please clean the floor,
Yeah.
I'm using the same word as if I'm like, is the floor clean?
Yeah.
Now, you might clean the floor, and then I come in and say, is the floor clean? And you could tell me yes or no. Because usually when we think of clean things, we think like maybe food plates, dishes, hospital equipment, that kind of stuff is clean. Floors, toilets, etc. Those aren't clean, even if we clean them,
Yeah.
right? So there are particular circumstances where maybe I went and I cleaned the floor, but the floor is still not clean. This is the difference between a noun and a verb.
Okay.
And so when I'm talking about sin, it never is used in the noun form to describe any sexual behavior, which
Wow.
was just wild to me to find because I thought for sure, with all of the times that sins are listed as problematic, for sure this happened. But here's just a couple of things that are sin, just so we understand how specific of a meaning there is to this term. It's usually a ritual significance. So breaking an oath, making of a golden calf. This is most of the times when the Bible uses the word sin, it's for golden calves, which is just fascinating. Usurping a prophet's authority, stealing God's sacrifice, forsaking God to serve another God, building altars to other gods. And that's it, except for three other pieces in Proverbs, which talk about sins in terms of human relationships to one another. So, like having just weights and measures. So, being unjust in the marketplace or in your financial dealings.
Wow.
Telling lies, I believe, is another one of the examples in the Proverbs. And then you can also sin by touching a carcass, by having a genital emission, and by giving birth to a child. Those are all the ways that you can sin. You can't sin by having sex.
Whoa. What about masturbate?
And well, so see, that's where it gets interesting because genital emissions can do something. They disqualified you in that context from going to the temple. And so, if we're thinking of sin now in terms of an inability to connect with the divine or something that gets in the way of divine connection, sin now requires a sacrifice or a waiting of a period of time. And there's a number of things you can do to get over a sin or to recover from a sin. And the fact that giving birth is a sin or
Yeah.
touching the carcass of an animal is a sin should inform us a little bit about what sins actually are.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Sins are this participation in the restoration of a relationship with the divine. Sins always have sacrifices, not consequences.
Ooh.
This is not how we talk about it in English.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
This is how it works in the Hebrew scriptures.
And when I hear that, back to the perspective that I've heard before around missing the mark, it's like, okay, I missed the target. If I'm in that perspective, I missed the target. I got to go grab my arrow and walk
Yeah.
back and shoot again. And in that process, aim again, pull the string back again, and maybe like fix something I messed up and missing.
Yep. Exactly. And in order to know you missed the target, you have to know where the target is, right?
Ooh, yeah.
So, like you were saying earlier, if all we ever talk about is here's the thing to not hit, here's the thing to not hit, then you either don't shoot at all because you know you're going to mess up, or you shoot and hit the thing you weren't supposed to hit. And you're like, yeah, maybe this isn't everything I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because with all of this, which to me just seems like really poor education and teachings and mistranslations, but people's minds make such a mess of it.
Yes.
And I mean, I can't even imagine if there was a way to measure the amount of wasted energy that has come through thought form, believing that I'm wrong or bad or broken or condemned or whatever.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, I've only talked about the word sin. See, I didn't I didn't mention any of the other words. Remember, there's 26 different ways that you can get this wrong in Hebrew. But what I've only addressed is the actual word for sin in the noun form. When we
Beautiful.
get to the verbal form, you can sin by having sex with somebody else's property. You can sin by killing another person to have sex with their property. There's another of
But what does that mean? Their property.
their woman.
But here, once again, what you talked about earlier messes this all up because in that other translation, we're not supposed to own the woman.
Now, this is actually that particular verse is one of those places where Jesus is being revolutionary in his teachings.
Ooh.
Because it is in the teaching of Jesus where for the first time a woman could be violated through adultery. Throughout the Hebrew scriptures and in patriarchal cultural context, the person who is violated by adultery is the husband. It is always the husband who is violated by his wife having sex with another man. I think we still kind of hold this belief system in our own day.
Hmm.
But Jesus is the first to introduce the idea that you can commit adultery against a woman, not just by using that other man's woman,
Hmm.
which is a unique thing. I haven't studied. I would love for a Jewish scholar to come on and offer a little bit more nuance on this because Jesus, he's also participating in the dialogue of his time, and things were changing in Second Temple literature around the times of Jesus. And sometimes he's trendy and sometimes he's not. And sometimes he's just really standing up and saying, hey, this, you guys missed the whole point. But yeah, that's an example of Jesus being revolutionary. So when we're seeking to understand the scriptures and how they inform our approach to sex, particularly coming from the Christian tradition, we're saying, how do we follow the way of Jesus, who had a particular method of reading and interpreting the Hebrew scriptures? Jesus and Paul used the Hebrew scriptures all the time. They weren't
Hmm.
trying to set up something separate. They were trying to say, this is the goal the whole time that you all, they're trying to show where that target is
Yeah.
for us all to hit.
Yeah. Totally.
And they're doing that in conversation with the Hebrew scriptures, what we call the Old Testament now. They're doing that in conversation with other teachers of the Bible, particularly the Pharisees, because the Pharisees were people in their time who thought the reason why all these disasters have come upon us and why Rome owns the country is because we have not lived up to our covenant with God. They're thinking about this in terms of sin.
Hmm.
They're like, we broke our covenant, therefore disasters have come upon us, and therefore we need some kind of, way to get back. And this is Solomon's prayer, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, pray, turn from their wicked ways, then God hears from heaven, forgives sin, and heals the land. So that's their framework. Jesus comes in, he's in conversation with them and saying, yeah, but it's not about keeping all of these laws of Moses. These laws of Moses were meant to point you toward the target. Like, and then Paul will come in and say, by knowing all the things not to do, that doesn't help you get to where you're trying to go. So Christianity is this little add-on to this Hebrew tradition saying, okay, we tried. There was the prophet Moses who gave us this law that said this is God's divine order for the way things are supposed to work. Nobody could keep it. People kept eating shellfish and having sex and doing all these other kinds of things. And I'm being a little bit facetious, but Jesus, as this prophet, is part of a historical prophetic tradition that includes Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the minor prophets. They're all looking for another prophet who will put the laws of God inside the hearts of humanity. And the whole story is how do we get back to the Garden of Eden? How do we
Yeah.
get back to this place of connection between heaven and earth? When Jesus says in the Lord's Prayer, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, he's speaking to this fundamental reality of union and polarity.
Ooh.
There is division so that there can be reunion. And you have the
Ooh.
same thing happening in the creation stories in the book of Genesis. The bookends of the Bible as a whole, from Genesis to Revelation, are about, we could even say, sexual intimacy. I think it's not exactly the right term, but
Yeah.
it is this division of one from the other, the heavens and the earth, the male and the female, and then there is a reunion. There is a one and the other coming together. So the Garden of Eden is this meeting place of heaven and earth where the Spirit of God breathes into the body of humanity, who then cultivate creation, who co-create life, who live in this place that is called the land of pleasure and delight.
Mm.
We lose that. We eat the tree of knowledge and good and evil, this fruit, and now we're all judging each other. We're like, this is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong. And in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses builds on this imagery, or whoever wrote the book of Deuteronomy builds on this imagery, saying, choose life. Eat from the tree of life instead of from this tree of knowledge of good and evil. But
Ooh.
we as humans constantly fall short of this. And Paul says in Romans, he says, we all have sinned, this is the term, and fallen short of the glory, or we are not able to fully embody who God created us to be in this world. This is
Wow.
the target. That's the Christian add-on to this story. And that's what you get with Jesus and with the early Christian tradition is saying, hey, we weren't able to make it.
Hmm.
But God created a way for us to make it, to move toward the target of who we're made to be. This
Ooh.
creatures of heaven and earth, not the Greco-Roman duality of the mind over matter and the invisible world is spiritual and good and the physical world is material and bad. No, but an integration and a restoration and a finding what is this purpose of sexuality? What is the purpose of the body, the purpose of life? So Christian message is all wrapped up around this. And unless we get that straight, I think we're going to have trouble like really framing what is our target in terms of sexuality because we don't know what we're shooting for other than not messing up.
Yeah, what is our target when it comes to sexuality? I love that so much. And you
Yeah.
just reminded me that even in the story of Adam and Eve and being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, it's like what we're not supposed to do once again.
Yep.
Don't, and once this is a whole other rabbit hole, but it's like it's the woman's
Oh my
fault
goodness.
that ate the fruit.
Right?
Temptation, whatever. But
Yep.
yeah, where's the story about the tree that we're supposed to eat from? And where's the
Yes.
target of what our sex is to be? And
Yes.
that and I love this idea of and I'm actually seeing the connection to sin, which is how can my relationship to sexuality connect me to the divine, connect me to the unseen, the spiritual, the
Yes.
energetic, whatever that is reconnecting and but I
Hmm.
that mark has to be created of what the target is of the sex that we quote unquote should be having.
Yes. 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 And I don't know about you, but I've been on this journey of integrating sexuality into a healthy part of life for, I think, about 10 years. And you'd think by now I've been to enough trainings, workshops, connected with my body enough times. I know what the mark is, and I still miss it.
Yeah, me too.
I still sin in this literal sense of the term. It is to miss the mark, and we all do this.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important to frame sin as this common human experience of even when we have the mark, we're all going to miss it, and it's okay that you miss it. It's okay. Because what do you do when you miss the target? You go, like you said, you go pick up the arrow and you try again. And maybe this time you're a little bit better. And then you practice it again. And you get people around you who are like, oh, amazing. You went and picked that up and you're trying again, as opposed to you idiot. I can't believe you didn't hit the target. Like,
Well,
and this changes our relationship.
And it makes me think of if as a baby is growing and learning and we'd be like, you idiot, you don't know how to walk?
Yep.
You idiot, you don't know how to chew your food? You idiot, you
Yep.
don't know how to speak? Oh, you idiot, you don't know how to read? And we're just pointing over and over again. Oh, you don't know how to
Yeah.
read? You don't know how to read instead of like, oh, good job. You didn't say that word quite right. This is how you want to say it.
Yes. But if the only thing that we understand, and I think this connects back to what you were saying about lacking mentorship, is that if the people who are the mature ones around sexual ethics, if all that they know was you need to get married before you do it, they don't actually know what the target is.
Ooh, yeah.
They only know how to do it wrong. And so when you come up to a baby, instead of saying, here's how you walk, you're like, well, that's not how you do it. Well, that's not how you do it. That's not how you do it. You just build this whole thing of shame around a person because that's what everybody knows is what ought not to be done.
I think we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
I think we're getting somewhere. Okay, so what is needed in this world, particularly in this conversation, is a clear target when it comes
Yes.
to what is a healthy relationship to sexuality, not what is a bad, wrong relationship to sexuality. And
Right.
why? What makes it that way? What makes it a healthy relationship to sexuality? Well, I feel more connected. I feel more present. I'm less, whatever the descriptions are, there's like a why that needs to go with it. Why is it the
Hmm.
target to aim for?
Yeah. And I think you've been studying this now from a number of different perspectives. Like what kind of things have you seen that people use to build that why? Like, what
Mm,
is the basis that people use to say, this is why I think this is the target? Because let's just say we don't all know what the target is.
right.
Let's say we have to figure this out. What are our resources? How do we do that?
Wow. It's so interesting because for me, it has been it has been grabbing the arrow, shooting again, grabbing the arrow, shooting again,
Yep.
missing, 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 and then I'm like, I don't know, it's interesting. It's almost as if through the shooting I'm finding the target. And
Yes.
I only learn when I miss why that's a miss. You
Hmm.
know? So that's interesting to bring it back to that because it's like through this experience of trying again and again, but with this perspective of how is this impacting me and the people around me?
Hmm.
Like, is this act, let's say masturbation, that's just me. So, how is my masturbation impacting me? Which requires a skill
Hmm.
to be honest and really see the impacts.
Yeah.
And then, to bring it to relationship with another, it's like, I'll go into this story. I shared this with you earlier, and I think it's a good time to bring it, which is
Hmm.
in my own personal experience, navigating this in sexual experiences and having it come up in my head of feeling like I'm doing something wrong, I'm doing something bad.
Yeah.
I'm just feeling these things in my body of wrongness. And I was sharing with Kevin earlier that there's times when I've gone through checklists and been like, am I being open and honest? Am I
Hmm.
communicating? Is this consensual? Are we happy? Like I'm going through this list in my head
Right.
that I didn't even think about it. Like that was me kind of creating a checklist for the target.
Right. And maybe you've learned that by shooting the arrow and you're like, oh, I wasn't being true. That didn't feel the way I wanted it to feel. Or,
Yeah,
oh, I tried this thing that everybody says, but that didn't work for me.
right. Or, I think a big barometer for me in all of it, and it stands up for me as part of this target is connection and presence.
Hmm.
Those are like two of the key pillars for me in my experience is like, am I connected to myself and this other person if there's another
Yes.
person involved? Am I present? Those are like two key things on this made up target that we're creating right now. Those are two
Yep.
key ones that I have come to find feels like it is the target I want to shoot at.
I'm going to propose that the more you ponder those and the more you look into them, the more you're going to find a lot of religious traditions, including Christianity, support that deeply.
Yeah,
Like I challenge just a little bit of phrasing that we commonly use around
please,
sex.
please.
When we say the term to have sex,
Ooh,
which is how most people refer to our topic of conversation today, having sex. Did you have sex or did you do it? This idea of the word have is associated with possessing because you can either have something or you can not have it. It's like when we say, did you have your breakfast? You have to take like something has to be yours. This is a possessive relationship to sex.
yeah,
And so not having something makes you feel like you're in this deficit of, oh my goodness, I did not have sex. Whereas if you had it, whatever it happens to be, what I don't know what you think it is, because a lot of people define this differently. Having sex, well, I'll put it this way. As I was studying the biblical teachings on sexuality, I think it was particularly in the Greek I was looking at this. There is not a word for have sex. And I'll actually jump to the Hebrew for a moment because I'm studying that lately, and there's words like to go into. There are words for to have. There is the word to lie with. There's the word to uncover the nakedness of. There's the word to humiliate. There's the word to violate. These are all different forms of relating to one another that may or may not involve human reproductive capacity.
yeah.
So, what I've been thinking about just in my own journey, I have focused so much on sins and so much on what not to do because I'm a student of the Bible and it's full of it. And somebody asked me the other day, they said, "So what is the positive message in here?"
Yes.
And I said, I've taken so much time to deconstruct these negative messages that finding that positive message has been hard, but I think it's there in that difference between having sex and making love. It
Ooh.
is there in the difference between consuming
Ooh.
sexuality and co-creating an experience of intimacy.
Let's go.
So I'm thinking about when you say, I want to have sex, what most people are thinking are probably not, I want to participate in the biological reproduction of the human species.
Rare.
Rarely, sometimes, maybe 1% of the
Very
time, whatever.
rare.
Usually it's what? Like, I want to experience intimacy. I want to have pleasure. I'd like to have an orgasm. I want to play with somebody. I want to be connected. I want to experience my body. I want to drop into the moment. And you don't even need a physical body for most of this stuff.
Mm. Well,
What we're really looking at is this invitation to oneness or intimacy or to experiencing union or the reality that we are all one, to meeting God in each other.
I
Like
mean,
yeah,
what better way is there to forget that we are individuals separate from everything than entering one another?
hmm yeah,
Like actually conjoining and inserting different body parts and different body parts and like coming together like that. I mean,
right.
how else can we match that?
There, there's only one other experience that I think comes close. And that is, say, a corporate worship ritual, usually involving music, movement, dance, like this deep sense of openness and participation in a singular movement with a group of people.
Yeah,
And so I can see this ranging from a group down to even just with yourself and experiencing those intimate moments of presence.
totally.
And it could look different every time. It could look different with every single person. But the point is, as long as we're trying to have sex, there's this thing we're trying to get from someone else.
Yeah.
But when we can switch to this co-creation mindset,
Yeah.
this, hey, what can you and I make together?
Yeah. I love that. And I have felt that in my explorations and journey with all this is what feels empty and like the hungry ghost that can never be satiated is
Yes.
consumptive.
Yep.
But creative, whether it's with myself or another human, that is where it is energizing and fulfilling and satiating, is when there's a
Yes.
creative energy to it. And I think this is a huge piece right here for everyone is like looking at how my sex is consumptive. And I think this is one of those things that to point at porn, which is like that is a very consumptive, for the most part, experience. I'm just consuming this video, I'm watching it and going through this experience that's very, it's not as it's there's potential that you could be really creative and be a co-creator with that thing you're watching, maybe, but for
Hmm.
the most part, it's consumptive. And so, yeah, this compass of does it feel collaborative and creative and alive, like its own living thing? Or
Uh-huh.
is it repetitious, consumptive, mental? Then that's like gonna lead me to never feeling satiated and chasing it more and more and feeling like shit about it.
Yes. Though I would actually, can I challenge one of the things you said a little bit?
Yeah.
I've been playing around with this idea for a while. I think last summer I published a video called Why Porn is Not the Problem.
Ooh.
And it was focused specifically around this question of consuming.
Ooh.
And so as you were speaking, I was thinking about a painter, an art producer who is, say, making a painting. The reason they're making that painting is they want someone to come look at it. They
Yeah.
want someone to come and experience that. They want the person to pause and like through that piece of art to encounter something beautiful or profound. Now, I think it is possible to create erotic art.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
I think that the human body is one of the most beautiful things in
Yes.
this world,
Yes.
and that humans in intimate connection with each other is just there's nothing like that.
Agreed. Agreed.
So how do we differentiate
Yeah.
between the person who's like, oh my gosh, have you been to the Louvre? Because there is just painting after painting by these people who are so good at this, versus, man, I got 500 paintings stuck in my garage. Like, how many do you have?
Yeah, totally. Totally. 100%. And that's the thing is like it's an internal barometer. It's
Hmm.
an internal compass of when is it consumptive, when is it creative, that really that's one of the first targets.
Yes.
How do I come to learn what that feels like inside of myself when my
Yeah.
sex is consumptive or when my sex is co-creative or collaborative, alive?
Yeah.
Like that gets to be one of the first targets in the direction of this thing that we're talking about that is targetless.
Right. But maybe it's not, because in the Christian tradition, we speak of this, the opening chapters, opening verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created. The very first thing that we learn about God is that God creates. So when human beings are created in the image of God, which means we are meant to be like God in the world, the
Yeah.
thing that we know about God by that point is that God creates and creates and creates and then calls it good and then makes more stuff.
Yeah.
This is who we are as human beings, are people who are born to create, who are born for connection with each other, with God, with nature. This is the when there's the people call the dominion mandate, where they're like rule over creation. This is a misreading of this idea of to cultivate the world around you. Is look, you have all of these resources and raw materials, and the stream of water is going to run, but guess what? You can dam it up and produce electricity. Or maybe you can help to rescue a bunch of fish that got trapped behind a fallen tree. Like you are co-creating with all of life. It's not just about sex, and it's especially not about money. So,
Yeah. It's definitely about mo sex more than it is about money.
yes. Though even money itself, like I've appreciated the way that you've addressed this over the past year and a half or two in your work because it is important to talk about how humans exchange energy with one another in a way that is life-giving and co-creative as opposed to consuming and taking.
Life-giving. That's the target, man.
Yeah.
That's a big part of the target. Life-giving. Is it building? Is it creating? Ooh. Sounds
Yes.
like sounds like we've got a training coming out soon that's going to be focused on the target.
This is the move and the shift in orientation that I've been making this year because I have spent a lot of time helping people look, everybody says this is a sin. And when we look in the scripture, like we learn some fascinating things just about the word sin itself, not to mention lust or porneia or fornication or adultery. These things are fascinating and I've studied them to no end, probably will continue, but they don't help a person get to this understanding what you're talking about, where you know this is not where I want to be. But unless you can take an experience, like if say one of the men's groups that you hold, unless I show up to one of those and I experience the breath entering my body and I'm like, wait, I can feel air inside my lungs. I remember the first time that happened to me. I was like 27. I was like, you can do this? What? And even just this past year, to be able to experience a sexual connection and I will call it sexual. I'm still working on my language, but to find myself so at one with another human being in every possible way. At that moment, I said, this is where I'm trying to go.
I just got goosebumps. Wow. Yeah. And yeah, it's like a timelessness in that moment of
Mhm.
co-collaborative, creative, life-giving union
Yeah.
that is so divine.
Yes. I think it exposes the mystery of God more than anything else that we can do in this world.
I agree.
And not just intellectually. Like you're talking about, it is that actual experiencing of something in a way that only you can experience it.
Right. Yeah. And me, and if it's a solo act, then just me. But if it's me with another person, then it's like that, though these two unique beings coming together to create something completely unique between
Yep.
like
Yes.
unique, whoever's in there, all unique, coming together, then that is unique. That is a unique co-creation, collaboration.
Yep.
Oh man.
Nobody else can co-create what you can with this person in this moment. And to learn how to show up and be present and to experience that. And like, that's why I'm here.
Imagine if we all had that confidence going into intimacy. This could never be recreated. No one could ever do it like me in this moment with you. Let's collaborate. Let's co-create.
Yes. But exactly. It's not just about though what we do with our genitals.
Right.
It is what we do with our words. It's what we do with the moments. Like even showing up to have this conversation between you and I.
Yeah.
If we can show up and be present, something can emerge here that cannot emerge anywhere else between anybody else. This is unique. And what an opportunity to engage in my own life, for you to engage in your own life. And the more that we're open to like letting this life that's outside of us which maybe we think of it as God, to be present in the midst of us, we're now participating in something that goes beyond what we understand. We're not in the tree of knowledge of good and evil and judging what's wrong and what's right anymore. We're tasting and participating in this tree of life.
Mm.
So I'm grabbing symbolism from Christianity, and we could talk for hours about this. But ultimately, it's not about sex. I think I'm going to quote Tyson Adams again. I learned with him for over a year, and so he's influenced me a lot.
Yeah.
But he would say something like, "How you treat your penis is how you treat everybody else in your life."
Mm.
And I would say how you experience your sexuality is how you're experiencing everything else in your life. You can't isolate sex and say, "Okay, I'm going to show up with presence for this moment of
Yeah, yeah,
intimacy."
yeah. Yeah. But nowhere else.
Nowhere else.
Yeah.
Only here. Once the clothes come off, then I bring my awareness, I bring my presence, I bring my relational skills. But if we're not doing that outside, and if the only reason we're learning these things is to have sex, like I'm like, okay, this is a great motivator, but again, we're still trying to consume. And how is it that we can recognize and already be this full, complete creator of our own experience right here?
Yeah. Phew. We dropped a lot on them.
Oh my goodness. That was pretty good.
Thank you so much for your life's dedication and sharing it with us this last hour.
Yeah.
And I know this will not be the last time we have a conversation about these subjects.
No, no, I think we have many more things to discuss, or maybe just the same thing to say over again.
I'm okay with that. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Anything you want to leave the audience with before we sign off here?
Yeah, one last little piece. A lot of times people have heard that humans are fundamentally evil because we've heard this idea of original sin, or we are all sinners in the sight of God. I was studying Orthodox theology this past term, and one of the things I realized in that course is that the concept of sin is actually good news, kind of like what we were just talking about right now. It is good news that everybody misses this mark because the mark is beyond us. It is, let's just say the mark is God and experiencing the divine and the infinite possibility of our life.
Hmm.
We all miss that.
Hmm.
That is what the idea of sin in Christianity is supposed to convey. That deep inside of you, where that truth is, where that image of God resides, you are desiring love. You are born to create. You're designed for intimacy. You have the capacity for goodness, and you are fundamentally a human being created in the image of God
Hmm.
who still fails to live up to everything you can be. So if somebody talks about sin and they say you are a sinner, they're misunderstanding what the Christian message is.
Hmm.
They're typically trying to make you feel bad, like you're fundamentally evil and going to hell, because they don't have the target. They don't have this target. And so where Christianity meets sexuality is, I think, around this conversation of sin and ethics, where we recognize that, hey, Ian, checking in with yourself and realizing this is what you truly desire, you're touching and reaching into the core of who God created you to be.
Hmm.
And if we can let go of this idea that it's a problem to miss the target,
Yeah.
and if we can say, yeah, we all miss it. And guess what? There is forgiveness, there's restoration in the Christian tradition. We have something called the Holy Spirit to work in this transformation inside of your life so you can get up and try again. We have this thing called community, where we are called brothers and sisters, all sharing in this common human experience. And so when I say, yeah, we all sin and fall short of the glory of God, that is saying, yeah, there is a target. I believe there is a target, and I think we can get closer to hitting it. Are any of us going to get it spot on all the time? I don't think so. But sometimes the arrow's going to land. Sometimes it's going to land. And when it does, you're going to know.
Hmm. Hmm.
Feel exactly the way it was supposed to feel.
Mm,
Everything inside of you, that image of God, that creator, that lover, comes alive. You remember who you are. So
mm,
it's not again, it's not about sex. It is about who are you? And the sexual experience, what we can co-create with each other. Oh my goodness, so much capacity to help us remember that truth of who we are.
mm. Thank you so much. I'm really letting that land for myself. And any of you listeners, if you have any questions, any comments, we're here for the discussion. Put them down below. If it's for Kevin, I'll send it to him. And if
Yeah.
it's for me, I'll respond. Much more to come. Thank you.
Yes.
And I look forward to continue to hearing what you are revealing in your studies to come.
It has been a pleasure talking with you today, Ian.
Thanks, brother. Cheers, everybody.